Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm Koula Callahan, here to bring you another edition of 3 More Questions with David Novak. David, we're debriefing your conversation with another Louisville legend, Pat Kelsey.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pat Kelsey is a great basketball coach, and I can't tell you how happy I am, since I am a Cardinal fan, that he is now leading the University of Louisville basketball team. He's a tremendous leader. He's a learner. I met him a couple months ago. We had a great discussion, and I just love the way he thinks. And this episode lays it all out on the table, and you'll see why he's one of the hottest up-and-coming coaches in the world of college basketball.
My favorite part of the episode is towards the very end, and I'm not going to spoil it for the people who haven't listened to it, but if you need something to really get you fired up for the new year, or maybe you're a coach of a team and you need a really inspirational, motivational pregame speech, go frickin' listen to this episode and maybe just fast forward it towards the very end, because it is so good.
We don't want people fast forwarding to the episode. Come on. We want everybody learning everything he has to say before that. But it is a great way to end the episode, and it's worth the wait.
It totally is. Well, David, I'm excited to break down some of the stuff that you and Pat talked about in our 3 More Questions episode today. So let's roll with it. Question number 1. A theme that Pat mentions several times in the episode is crush it where you're at. And from his perspective, leaders in any position ought to treat their current job as if it were their next job. David, can you break that down for us? I mean, what is he really getting at here?
Well, one of the things I love about this guy is he's just has great common sense. How can you get the next job if you don't do the job you already have really well? Makes sense to me. I can tell you, when I was coming up in the world of business, I wanted to do the very best job in the job I was in. And then I'd look up and see who had the next job. And then I'd work my tail off to, get those skills while I was doing that job that I needed to do so that I could move up to the next job. And I kept doing that throughout my career. But I never took the eye off the ball. If you don't get results where you're at, you're not going to get the opportunity to get results in a higher position in any company that you're at. So, I think what he talks about there, this idea of crushing it where you're at, I never heard anybody really use that phrase, but man, that's one that I want to keep, because I think it says so much about how you rise in your career.
I think what he's also getting at here, David, is this concept of presence. Like, if you're so focused on the next thing and you're future tripping about what that next career move would be, you miss out on a ton of just joy and fullness of life and leading and your position in the current moment. So I also love this nod to just practicing presence that he talks about throughout the entire episode, and it's obviously a tenet of how he leads.
He talks about, like, when he had an assistant operating job, he had to do all this grunt work, but he did it, and he did it better than anybody else and had ever done it. And then when somebody had a chance to be an assistant coach, guess who got the chance? It was him, but it's like he embraced the job that he had, and he knew that if he did it as well as it could possibly be done, the next thing might come to him. And in his case, it did. And I think in most cases it will. But one thing I know for certain, if you don't do the job you're in well, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to get the nod to take on more responsibility.
Question number 2. Pat believes that leaders ought to always be reminding their teams what the standard is. In fact, he sometimes refers to himself as the CRO, the Chief Reminder Officer. Pat believes that it's his job to remind everyone on his team every day of the standard of excellence that they have to hold themselves to. I love this idea of the CRO. And David, I know that you are a big fan of reminding people of your cultural drivers. What are the best ways, in your perspective, that a leader can remind their team of their standard of excellence?
Well, I think you want to recognize the great behaviors when you see them. So I think you need to use recognition as the tool to remind people of what you're really looking for on your team. And you got to recognize the good behavior, and you also have to recognize the bad behavior. When people are not doing what you want, when people aren't really representing your cultural values, you got to call it out right then and there. You got to really hold people accountable. And so I think if you just think about recognition in broad terms, recognize the good things that you see that reinforce what you're looking for, and at the same time recognize those bad behaviors by calling them out and saying, this is not what we're all about around here. I think you'll get your message across and people understand what you really stand for, and people know what they're expected to do if they're going to be on your team, and you're going to win together.
One of the things I love about how Pat drives culture in his team is that their cultural blueprint, it's just easy to remember, number one. So if you're reminding people of something, make that thing easy to remember and easy to latch onto and have energy around it, because the more that you do that, the easier it's going to be for those folks to remember it and also to put it into practice.
I agree. And that's why little simple acronyms that people use that people can remember very quickly in terms of really laying out what your, principles are, then people will get it. And it's easy to remember, but more importantly, people know what you're supposed to do. And I think as a leader, you got to lay out what the ground rules are and what the expectations are. And once you do that, you hold people accountable for it, and you have a lot of fun recognizing people who are doing the stuff you want to have done.
Question number 3. Pat has his players create a personal shield inspired by the shields that ancient warriors carried into battle. Each shield that he has them create basically tells their life story, where they're from, what their family's like, etc. Pat's favorite part of having his players present their shield to the rest of the team is when he asks the question, who is your hero? Because it always sparks emotion and allows their team to get to know each other on a more intimate level. Now, David, if you were creating your shield, who would be your hero?
Well, I've had a lot of heroes in my life. People have really impacted me in hopefully a very positive way. The living hero that I would have to recognize today would be my father. He's 95 years old. He showed me just, the power of having an incredible work ethic. He has a great sense of humor. I mean, he makes people laugh. He's very, very kind. And he never says a bad word about anybody. And he could tell stories that people want to hear. And he's got the one-liners that you'll never forget. So my dad was my hero. I hope that I can live to be as old as my father and have the positive spirit that he has. He never, ever complains. He just sees the world in positive terms. And I love that about him.
Charles Novak is an unbelievable man. That's a great answer, David. I love your dad. He's a hero of mine, too.
Yeah, well, he's definitely my hero for sure. But, one other thing about this shield exercise is that what Pat talked about is when they tell their life story, the players really open up and share who they are and what they're all about and what drives them. And one of the exercises I always used when I was at Yum Brands, and I've done with teams wherever I've been, is the lifeline exercise, where you really, take your life from beginning to where you're at right now, and you're either above the line or below the line in terms of what things have happened to you in your life. For example, me being born the son of Charles and Jean Novak would be something that I'd put above the line, and I would plot it up there. But then, when I launched Crystal Pepsi at Pepsi-Cola Company, it was a real dog, and that was below the line. But but I learned from all these things, and you do all these episodes in your life, and you have a lifeline, and you share it with everybody. When we do that, that's such a great way to get to know the people that you're working with on a much more personal level, where you have to share and be vulnerable. Because when you share and you're vulnerable, that's when you really get at the soul of people. And, I think that's what Pat really understands. If you can get teammates to understand each other's soul and understand where they've come from, they're gonna relate to each other in a very powerful way, and it'll just build over time.
It also works for anybody. I mean, Pat does it with teenage guys, right? I mean, these kids are like 18, 19, 20 years old. David, I know you've done this lifeline exercise with people all over the world. So it doesn't matter what culture you're in, how old you are, or where you come from, this type of getting to know your fellow teammates is just so powerful, and there's no replica for it.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, David. Well, that wraps our episode of 3 More Questions for today. Hey, go Cardinals.
Absolutely. They've got a long ways to go, but they're going to work their tail off to get there.
Thank you so much for tuning in to How Leaders Lead. We're on a mission here to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. And if you carve out a little time with us each and every week, we'll help you build the confidence you need to lead well.
Next week on How Leaders Lead is my conversation with Louise Brady, managing partner and co-founder of Piedmont Capital Partners. And Louise is a real people person. And she's also a person that knows how to diagnose businesses and figure out what to invest in. And I think you'll learn a lot by the way how she thinks about business opportunities and the people she has the privilege to lead.